My ancestor, Greene Cottingham, was a focal point of the book Slavery by Another Name. And he was chosen because he represented someone who was re-enslaved after slavery, someone re-enslaved in the 20th century, and someone who died while re-enslaved while working for a company that at the time of the book was still around today. Greene was my great-grandfather's first cousin. He was charged with vagrancy, which means pretty much he couldn't get somebody to vouch for him, and disappear from a whole family, never to be seen again. Gone. So there's no telling why they grabbed him, because they would, and what, from what I understand in researching convict leasing, you would see these numbers of these arrests go up when it was time to have harvest time, or when they needed a lot of labor, or when there was somebody coming looking for workers, or there was a new demand from some corporate entity. They'd just start rounding people up. It's not like they picked people up and then everybody always knew what happened. Maybe on a best case, they thought he made it up north. Maybe they thought he left town. If it had happened to my first cousin, I would have hoped that they had just hopped a train. Not that they died in a coal mine as a slave. He died so young and probably without children, to our knowledge. Greene Cottingham was in his early 20s when he was re-enslaved and died in the mines. The conditions in these forced labor camps were horrible. Minimal food to keep you alive, maximum work to make as much money off of you as they could. No accountability. That was Greene's life. So when they say in the records that he died of syphilis, I highly doubt that. But, who am I to say? What I am here to say is that vagrancy is not a crime punishable by death. They call them the prisoners. Because if you could make it sound like these people deserve to die, then it's not something that makes you feel bad. So by identifying these victims as prisoners, who, then it made it okay. So what I have found that that makes you wonder is, if I give you a label that makes you unworthy, then it makes it easier for me to mistreat you. So by taking people like Greene Cottingham, charged with vagrancy, which is, I can't get a white man to vouch for me, I can then label them a prisoner, a criminal, and then I can kill them with impunity and say they deserved it. Learning about Greene Cottingham and to the extent that we dealt with convict leasing, the scope of it was much more massive. You had heard in life there were bad people who did bad things. What you didn't realize is it was government sanctioned. This whole convict leasing system where, you could be rounded up, forced to work, you got no money. But the judicial system did. They got a fee for bringing you in. Then the county got paid, or the state got paid. And I did not realize it was institutionalized. It was the system. It was widespread. And it had long-term implications. And then everybody tried to hide it. So the importance of an archetype like that is for us to all say, there are long-term consequences to Greene Cottingham's free labor for this company that still makes money. The fact that it was a 20th century crime. That's, we all want to think slavery ended. And what happened to these people? Why haven't they done better? People had identified the actual mine where Greene Cottingham had been assigned. Also, they identified where bodies were buried from these commercial industrial facilities, and we took a journey to take a look. But we go over there, and then they're explaining to me that the bodies were not quite dumped, but they weren't identified. Like, they didn't say Greene is buried here. They were just like these graveyards. And there was no way I was going to probably know, but I did know maybe if I walked this area, I could honor Greene in his death. I could honor him just by caring You know how sometimes you visit loved ones at cemeteries and put flowers there? So I felt like my stroll through the unmarked or scoured out tombstones in that whole area just was a way to say, you know, you mattered. They registered Greene Cottingham in with the proper name, and when he died, they didn't even bother to spell it the same way they spelled it on the way in. And they didn't care. And if we hadn't cared, Greene would have been a nobody to history. So the irony and the beauty is the fact that Greene is very important in history. Greene Cottingham has a Pulitzer Prize winning book focusing on him. And that's where you wonder about what value, you know, human value is, and how to own it, and how do you define value of an individual. There's a scripture, and it says that I'll call them beloved who are not beloved. What we define as valuable in terms of people, and what we define as worthy. There's probably a farm worker now who's picking strawberries in Southern California, and there are all these people who we are totally dependent on to eat every day, and we don't value. But it would be interesting in the greater scheme of things that if we took a closer look, we might redefine, you know, who's beloved.